You have learned to talk, and also to remain silent and listen, to lay claim to your space, and to share it, to go far and discover the things that are closest to you, to change your mind, places, and habits. You have learned the importance of technology and respect for nature. You have learned that one is stronger when together, even when not in the same room. That one can finish first and also last. You have learned to be curious, to invent, and to discover. And you know that you will continue to do so. We do only one thing, so that you can do many. Cambium Networks, wireless that just works.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm Dean Bubley, and I'm going to be the moderator and host for today's second session of Cambium Connections. We've got a fantastic set of presentations and then a panel session. We've got live Q&A sessions, and I'm looking forward to hosting over the next few hours. I'm an industry analyst and futurist. I cover various areas of wireless technology, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about 60 gigahertz, next generations of Wi-Fi, 5G and more. Before I give a quick introduction, though, what I'd like to do first is to give a bit of a walkthrough on some of the features of the platform that you're going to be using. First thing I should note is that each session is a separate video window, and after the close of each presentation there's typically a break, and then you will need to click on the watch presentation for the next session in the window further down the web page. Also, on the event platform, you will be able to submit questions during each presentation. There's a text box, so just below the Zoom screen, there is an ability to feed in Q&A for that speaker session. There's one exception where the person is not available today. There's also a couple of other interactive options. There's what's called Live Chat with Cambium, which is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and that's for any general questions you've got for Cambium on things like products and contacts there. And then for technical queries, there is a help desk feature at the bottom of your screen for things like if you're having other issues with the platform itself. There's links to the speaker bios on the left-hand side of the web page, and also data and information about Cambium and videos to learn more about solutions, again on the left-hand side. There's also an event survey, and we very much like you to participate in filling that in as we go along, and also your overall thoughts at the end of this as well. And it's going to be possible to rewatch the event presentations up until March the 5th. And we'll always get questions at events like this about whether it's possible to access the materials. So if you come back to the same web page using the same password of Connect21, you'll be able to revisit all the content over the next couple of weeks. So a quick introduction, just to sort of set the scene. So I've been a wireless industry analyst for over 20 years, as well as some of you will have come across my social media alter ego of @DisruptiveDean on Twitter, where I typically make some fairly acerbic comments on the state of wireless, whether that's 5G or Wi-Fi or other parts of the industry. And I think that what I've been seeing over the last probably 24 months is a set of really important shifts. And despite the hype, it's not all about 5G, although 5G is an important part. We can think of this more as, if you like, the 5G era that we're entering into. And there's a lot of other things that are going along in parallel, and if you like, are correlated with 5G rather than necessarily caused by it. I think one of the most interesting things at the moment is around the democratization of professional and industrial service provider grade wireless networks. And I think that's partly down to the growing availability of lots of different new spectrum options. So we're seeing a lot more unlicensed spectrum available, and we're here today about 6 gigahertz in various parts of the world, also 60 gigahertz as well. But we're also getting a lot more shared licensed spectrum, either available on a very closely defined area for things like maybe factories or industrial facilities. And so you see various schemes in Germany and the UK and Japan and other places allowing people to build private 5G networks or private other wireless networks locally as well. I think that's going to be a trend that we see ongoing. If you look at some of the policy discussions in Europe, in various parts of Asia, North America, with things like CBRS as well, that is essentially democratizing spectrum. And I think we're at just an early stage into a long journey there, where eventually I can imagine there being almost like cloud-based spectrum and spectrum on demand. But I think that's probably several steps away from where we are today. I think the other side of democratization is it's becoming, to some extent, easier to build networks. There's greater availability of some of the building blocks, again, across technologies, whether that's the hardware or whether it's cloud-based control and management software, security capabilities, and so on. There are some obvious complexities that also come in around things like security, which mean that it's not that democratized. But what we're seeing is a world which is moving from, if you like, the past where we had a fairly clear divide between enterprise and service providers. And service providers are either, say, WISPs for fixed wireless access or mobile operators for 4G and 5G networks, to a much greater diversity of service providers, managed services, and so on. And I think this is a trend that we're going to carry on seeing, where the world isn't going to be this neat binary of enterprise and service provider, but we'll see growing role of perhaps infrastructure owners. You get tower cos and fiber cos. You'll see property companies involved. We've got a lot of the industrial automation systems companies that are becoming quasi-service providers. You're finding a lot of the IT and cloud providers are enabling services on demand. I nearly said services as a service, but you know what I mean, network as a service. And I think that heterogeneity is going to continue. And I think it's going to be an opportunity for businesses, for newcomers to the market, for investors potentially. It's also going to be a headache for regulators and policymakers to divide clear lines of what roles there are. But that's not a problem. That's, if you like, it's a good problem to have. I think the other side of heterogeneity is there will not be a single monoculture for network technologies, whether that's 5G or whether it's Wi-Fi or everything else. Whether we like it or not, there is going to be a mix of technologies pretty much everywhere. And yeah, that's, if you like, inelegant sometimes, but I think that it focuses on the reality of, let's say, a large business like a port or an airport, where you've got outdoor areas, indoor areas, you've got different buildings and structures. So maybe a metal walled warehouse, you've got structures that might be on the end of the dockside or a hangar at an airport. You've got lots of metalwork. You've got lots of different stakeholders of people who want and can build their own networks, particularly with unlicensed, or who use commercial service providers as well. And so what we'll see is this interesting mix of Wi-Fi, 5G, fiber, fixed wireless access of various sorts, possibly even some satellite as well, for different parts and different applications. And what you use for connecting a truck that's going in and out of a port will be very different to how you connect to the cameras on a dockside crane, or perhaps even the security cameras around the perimeter fence as well. And I think that because of the realities of how businesses or municipalities in a smart city, let's say, deploy their networks, sometimes there's an overarching umbrella, and sometimes there is specific applications and use cases which may well come with their own connectivity. I think that we're going to have this slightly messy world of multiple technologies, and there will be sometimes point solutions and sometimes broader strategies, and I think that's actually quite healthy because it reduces our reliance on any one technology or standard. If you use an environmental analogy, monoculture crops are efficient theoretically, but they're also potentially vulnerable, and they pose risks to biodiversity, and obviously are susceptible to particular, whether it's diseases or weather conditions. And if you look at environments that are more diverse, let's say a jungle, that's actually quite resilient. And I think that you'll find that those sort of analogies, there's some read across, and I'm starting to see this go both into the enterprise world, but also into the policy making world as well. So I'll have more to talk about in some of the comments as we go through, and hopefully you're now teed up for a set of really interesting sessions. Going back to the platform, if you came in late, just to say that there's a help button at the bottom, technical help at the bottom of the screen. Each session that you'll be watching will be in a separate window. So after each speaker and Q&A session, you'll have to click on the link to fire up the next window, which will pop up after the break, so it's on time with the agenda. So having said that, I'd now like to welcome our first presenter, and that's Atul Bhatnagar, who's the president and CEO of Cambium Networks, who's been with Cambium since 2013, and has really morphed it into a much more global business, and as we'll hear from him, taking it in lots of innovative directions. So with that, I would like to hand back to the platform and play the video to see the presentation.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Fixed wireless broadband is a critically important networking fabric that connects our local communities and people all around the world. Demand for broadband communications and infrastructure projects remain a priority throughout the world, driven by work, learn, and play from home. COVID and the new 5G standards are accelerating that trend as we are reaching new customers and entering new markets demanding higher performance. Today, I'll share industry and technology trends that have transformed our vision of the new era of gigabit wireless at the edge into reality. Faster speeds than we ever imagined would happen. As always, the past and present set the context for the future. Till now, we have lived in two worlds. One, with hard-to-reach places that relied on fixed wireless for their broadband connectivity, including small rural towns, remote homes and farms, or industrial sites, to name a few. Meanwhile, cable, fiber blossomed in cities and urban areas where density and ARPU justified the capital investment. The common thread is Wi-Fi, which has been and will continue to be the dominant method to access the internet for the last 300 to 400 meters. When 2020 arrived, a perfect storm accelerated digital transformation and technology transitions, which typically happen every 4 to 5 years. And broadband needs were accelerated by COVID pandemic. Digital transformation, highly visible to most of us, work from home, school from home, telemedicine, e-commerce, and outdoor connectivity, including schoolyards, parking lots, and other Wi-Fi hotspots. Happening behind the scenes, sensors enabling automated industrial processes, indoor and outdoors, HD security cameras, augmented reality in research and manufacturing, to just name a few things. The emergence of the 5G standard has legitimized fixed wireless broadband in a major way. Where industrial processes involve autonomous mobile infrastructure, mobile networks may be required. The immediate opportunity for most of us at this event are the capabilities that the 5G standards augments, fixed wireless broadband through low latency and high performance required by many digital applications. Let's take a deeper look at the 5G breakthroughs that will have the biggest impact on fixed wireless broadband. High frequencies like 60 gigahertz millimeter wave. What does it mean to throughput and channel width? Advanced APIs make it easier to implement spectrally efficient fixed wireless broadband algorithms. The 5G standards specifies ultra-resilient low latency communications, URLLC. Real-time machine-to-machine networks. The MU-MIMO specification enables engineers to build MU-MIMO architectures that vastly enhance the quality and resilience of fixed wireless broadband, especially when dealing with interference and noise. Successful digital transformation projects are focused on the task and not the tools. The outcome is what matters, whether it's being able to pick and pack an item at top speed, achieving the highest levels of quality in manufacturing, patient monitoring, quality of life for our elderly, creating safe and secure environments, effectively predicting and tracking the flow of goods and elements. All of these processes have unique connectivity requirements, not just at the connected device, but at all the way back to the application that drives that device, which is often in the cloud, right there on site or somewhere far away. There are three trends that transform this dream of purpose-built networks to a reality. Standards. Standards reduce the cost of the foundational technology. A deep understanding of the standards and how networks operate enables the development of algorithms and MU-MIMO architectures, which can achieve best-in-class spectral efficiency at exceptionally low cost. The emergence of these standards also make it easier to mix and match technologies such that best-in-class performance and cost can be achieved at every link in the network using a heterogeneous portfolio of technologies. Intelligence. We now have access to massive amounts of detailed data which we can use to plan networks such as LiDAR data, predict and diagnose issues, and optimize performance. The challenge is to develop software to make it easy to take advantage of all this data during the entire network lifecycle, while also using the same data to get the maximum amount of throughput from increasingly precious spectrum. Of course, intelligence is not just in the software. Network operators will always come across unique solutions that require access to experts for problem solving. That's why, in this era of automation, we know that access to qualified experts in real time, 24/7, across the globe will never go away. Applications. Every industry has its unique requirements. The third pillar of our vision is to continue growth of industry-specific solutions integrated with the network. As advanced APIs become easier to use and access, we expect to see more and more industry-specific applications become available, and networks adapting appropriately to match the needs of the specific application in real time. Wi-Fi capacity has also increased as solutions have evolved from 802.11n to the AC standard, and now to Wi-Fi 6 and the AX standard, delivering 450 megabit per second from an access point. Cambium's technology includes MU-MIMO, a cornerstone technology for high capacity. With continued developments in the technology, we are planning to deliver more than 3 gigabit per second of throughput per sector in the coming years. Technology is validated by adoption. Solutions must provide high performance and total low cost of ownership. Successful solutions are measured by adoption rate. Data collected from our network operator customers shows that the adoption rate for both fixed wireless network elements and for Wi-Fi access point has grown sequentially for the last 5 years. Centralized management is key to efficiently operating a network. Over the last 5 years, Cambium's CN Maestro management system is proving its value in providing end-to-end management of the entire network via a single pane of glass. This solution has seen rapid adoption where the number of CN Maestro management accounts is growing in each business region each year. We have now approximately 525,000 devices under management. From a global perspective, Cambium solutions are providing quality connectivity and value in more than 150 countries. Working closely with network operators, our global channel partners, and 24/7 support, Cambium is able to understand our customers' business. We listen to our customers' needs. We understand standards, innovate where it makes sense to do so, and test our ideas and solutions in real-world applications. These are some of the reasons why network operators trust and continue to choose Cambium solutions. I love this picture because I went to school in Albuquerque, the capital of hot air ballooning. It brings back good memories. However, that is not the reason I'm showing this to you. Our industry is at an inflection point. Just as hot air balloon soars into the sunrise when released, our customers, the service providers and enterprises who operate sophisticated networks, are about to be unleashed from the anchors of high cost and complexity. Just when the demand for digital connectivity has accelerated by at least 3 to 5 years, the technology has arrived to deploy multi-gigabit wireless from the device through the last mile. No more waiting for fiber. Software is now available to design purpose-built networks optimized for specific applications. The innovations in standards and new technology have made these capabilities more affordable and accessible than ever before. The view for the industry is going to be tremendous. I hope you enjoy it up there, and we look forward to helping you on your journey. The best is yet to come, and future is very bright. Thank you.
Atul, thank you for that presentation. That's really good scene setter on you've like the big picture of what we're seeing. Before we go into the questions, a couple of things. First off, if attendees want to submit their own questions, you'll see the text window underneath the video on the webpage. So I'd encourage you to submit questions, and we'll come to those during this session. And the other thing is, before we start really driving into the questions, I want to place a poll. And so you should be seeing a poll pop up on your screen about now. And we're looking at, interesting to hear what people's views are on the network traffic load and how that's changed since the pandemic started last year. And there's a couple of different options here as to sort of whether that traffic has doubled or more, or increased by 50% or 25%, or no significant change. And we'll come back to those results of that poll in a few minutes. But before we do that, so Atul, thanks for setting the scene and sort of highlighting some of the changes in society and business, and also the spectrum side of things. That's, if you like, the supply side. On the demand side, what are you seeing from end users? Are they becoming more sophisticated, or is there like an expert user group, and then there's a whole group of others who know they need something but not sure what they need?
Dean, first of all, greetings to everybody. Welcome to Cambium sessions here. COVID has globally made broadband wireless, broadband internet, absolutely a lifeline. In some ways, the entire world is experimenting at the same time. It's like a synchronizing event across the globe. So at this point, it's not really, it doesn't matter whether somebody's an expert or somebody's not an expert. The fact people are working from home, studying from home, entertaining, at home, the traffic has increased as we kind of talk to our customers, anywhere from 40 to 70%. It was more like 60-70% in the early part of 2020. And then as people figured how to deal with it, I think it was more like maybe 50%.
Yeah, I think it depends where you start measuring from, and depending on the date, the exact dates. I think that's entirely reasonable.
Precisely.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But what I was thinking perhaps was whether there's a difference in perception between, if like, the residential users who increasingly are working from home, and also what you're seeing perhaps on the enterprise side, whether there's been either some people are talking about an acceleration of industry transformation because of this, which would imply perhaps more sophistication. Is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, so Dean, in some ways, home became SME.
No, you can't see, but I know exactly. I'm one of those.
And we can all relate to that. Home has become a mini enterprise. And I think that's a significant transition. Many enterprises where, industrials, for example, energy grid, there are lots of enterprises, they had to operate with more automation, more. So I think you're seeing changes there as well. But I think the bottom line is networks are seeing more traffic. Networks need to be mission critical. Networks need to be easy to configure and deploy. Networks need to just work so people can focus on their applications and not necessarily the technical complexities. Those are the demands of the time right now.
Thanks. I agree. We'll come back to some of that in more detail later on. But what I'd quite like to do is flip over to the poll results, which I think should be available now. So I'm just getting the screen coming up. Yes. And so actually your comment about the sort of 50%, 40%, 50% is sort of mirrored. We're seeing the two largest respondent groups in the more than 25% and more than 50%, and some number that doubled or more. But I think there's that sort of 40 to 70 is a pretty good range, and it certainly tallies with what I've been hearing. And it varies depending whether it's a residential-oriented service provider or a consumer-oriented one, and what part of the world, and so on. But that certainly dovetails with what I was expecting. So with that, does that imply that in some ways access is becoming more of a commodity, or is it becoming more differentiated in some ways?
Yeah, access will always demand higher performance, lower price, right? That's kind of how this goes. But I think one can differentiate significantly with quality, low latency, and yet through innovation, the economic model, the cost effectiveness. So what Cambium does, we know that our customer base values the economic equation, all developing communities worldwide. But we also know, and coming out of Motorola, 9-10 years back as a company, we know that the RF quality and the mission criticalness of wireless has to be there, because we are powering industrial networks, we are powering residential networks, we are powering so many applications which are healthcare applications. So we absolutely believe that when you design these systems, I think the quality is paramount. Through innovations, whether it's MU-MIMO innovations, whether it's our 60 gigahertz millimeter wave innovation, we bring that performance and low latency. As you do it, I think you can differentiate, and it is definitely the demand for megabit per second per dollar will always drive that efficiency, no question.
How does that work in terms of timing as well? I mean, we know that, if you like, there's always a roadmap ahead of us on whether it's spectrum, whether it's standards, whether it's ratification. So, the Wi-Fi world, we see people talking about the next generation. I'm having discussions about 6G as well as 5G at the moment. If you like, where do you start, and sort of, how do you avoid the sort of paralysis factor?
Sure. I think as a company, we spend a lot of time talking to our customers. We spend a lot of time looking at frequency management worldwide. We spend a lot of time looking at standards evolution. We also spend a lot of time looking at chips evolution, how things are evolving, because all those factors have to be triangulated properly. And as we triangulate that, we generate the roadmap. And many times we have to make a bet. And those bets are not sure shot. For example, CBRS. We bet on CBRS 2, 3 years back. And as COVID happened in North America, CBRS became more important because everybody needed more bandwidth for that precious spectrum. You needed that for more throughput to the end user. So overall, I think it's not rocket science. It's a lot of it is intuition. A lot of it is decades of industry experience, where the puck is going to be, where the standards will evolve. So I think that over time we have figured, for example, 5G is arriving. 5G has multiple subsegments. In Wi-Fi 6, there are lots of standards evolving. Those are the easier part. But as you go towards industrial side, where there are multiple choices still, I think listening to customers becomes pretty important.
There's another constituency here. It's interesting. You mentioned CBRS, and obviously that's for people on this call who are not familiar with what's happened in the US, that's the localized shared spectrum model that the US has adopted over the last couple of years. But there was sort of quite significant regulatory and political impetus for that as well. And one of the things I see in my engagements at the moment is the sort of the awareness among policymakers, not just if you like the traditional telecoms minister who's looked after spectrum, but now it's the business minister and the agriculture minister and the rail and transport minister and so on. So what would you like to see from governments and regulators, whether that's on spectrum or other aspects of planning or anything else? What would make your life easier, and by extension, your customers' life easier?
Yeah. Well, I think the best practices need to be adopted across the world. Doesn't matter where they come from. Innovation is scientific, and science is always built on top of previous accomplishments. That's how breakthroughs happen. So I think CBRS in United States here is basically frequency management in the cloud and pay as you go, sharing spectrum, which is very precious resource. It's very similar to the way computing went to the cloud 15 years back, right? And
yeah,
it democratized computing.
I've started talking about spectrum as a service, as a sort of an endpoint where maybe not quite you sign up with a credit card and you get an allocation with certain rules in a certain place, but there's going to be this trajectory. But at the moment, there's very different divergent, both spectrum bands and rules available for things like enterprise, or for if I want to build a citywide or a metro network or a rural network. What would you say is best practice? Are there any countries or any rules that you would say, well, this is good, can you do that everywhere?
Yeah, I think CBRS is a very good way. It's pretty successful. We have over 75,000 devices through Cambium architecture managed through that. We have lots of customers moving in that direction, very efficient. And then there are other best practices as well, like 60 gigahertz millimeter wave. Now, 60 gigahertz millimeter wave, different countries will adopt different strategies, but fundamentally, that multi-gigabit wireless to the edge will bring LAN-WAN convergence. It'll bring cloud computing closer to the edge. It'll enable new applications, whether it's AI, machine learning, neural networks. So the way we look at things is wireless is the glue at the edge, especially last 10, 15 kilometers. And that glue going multi-gigabit is now going to enable next generation of connectivity, next generation of applications, next generation of edge cloud. All of that bodes very well. So it's not just computing, it's not just connectivity, it's the entire computing infrastructure it'll enable overall. And that's what the governments have to look at, that connectivity is lifeline. And the applications are so sophisticated, media rich, immersive, with AR, VR arriving in training, employees training, and all sorts of things. If they are not progressive, then those applications will not be unleashed.
I, I mean, it's interesting. I'd say I'm halfway between agreement and non-agreement. And the risk I find sometimes on the policy and government side is they get things wrong, or they get things from a particular subset of lobbyists. I was on an event earlier this week which had some policymakers in Europe, and some of the ways they were talking about edge compute, for example, it was stuff that I saw in edge compute conferences 2 to 3 years ago, and you think, well, actually,
Sure.
things have changed a bit since then. So I think that there's also an education side of this of making
Absolutely.
sure that government representatives, or you mentioned about where the puck is going. I think that's an important one, and it's not just a headline,
Absolutely.
marketing from whichever vendor sponsors adverts on the trams in their city or something like that.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. I think the way to think about this is networks have to now reach a point where they just demystify complexity. Right? They become like electricity, so that you can build sophisticated applications on top. In order to do that, there have to be policies so that innovation can be enabled, and and you can bring pervasive connectivity.
No, I agree, and I think the more I spend on the government policy side, the more I realise that's a separate rabbit hole, even compared with the technology side of it.
Yes.
And I think it's a really interesting one to sort of, for everyone, frankly, to engage with via their representatives, because I think the interesting thing for me is that there are all these different stakeholders now, and it's not just the telecoms minister who listens to the classic service providers, but it's the energy and the infrastructure and the education and the health functions in government that are waking up to the value of connectivity, even if sometimes they don't always get all the details. Let's to move on a bit, and so on the service provider side, one of the things I'm seeing from my clients is this broadening range of service providers, either that are focused on particular niches or coming from different backgrounds. Some of them also doing wholesale and neutral host is a real hot topic as well. Are you seeing that from your point of view in terms of people coming to Cambium for products?
The way we serve about 150 countries worldwide with our products through channel partners. So we see the major need right now. While everyone talks about a lot of advanced concepts and future and all that, major need right now is to scale the network, because the need of the hour is more users, and then existing customers asking for more throughput. So by and large, that reliability, that quality, and the affordability, those are the three key drivers for for us as we work with our customers. And industrial side is now beginning to evaluate for the real-time networks, machine-to-machine networks, which standards to go towards and which frequencies to adopt. But I would say reliability and affordability and scaling the network so that in a simpler manner, those are really the key drivers for us.
Okay, interesting. And we'll talk more about the industrial side, later on. But on the more broadband oriented, perhaps residential, is it again the same classes of service providers that are coming to you, or is it municipalities themselves that are wanting to build out local, maybe open access networks? I mean, I've been doing a lot of work on neutral
Sure.
host, and certainly interest in that. Whether it's on the fixed wireless side or on the 5G side, is there more local classes of network owner and operator, even if they're not classical service providers?
Sure. Yeah, we see quite a few wireless internet service providers worldwide. So that's one category which is catering to these developing communities globally. So we see these WISPs very active across lots of nations. So that's one category. Then we see tier 2, tier 3 service providers globally who are very progressive, who are some of them are wireline, but they're adopting wireless. Some of them are saying at this point they are technology agnostic. They're saying they focus on end users. So we are actually working with quite a few tier 2, tier 3. And then there are some tier 1s which are progressive. They are adopting 60 gigahertz. They are adopting Wi-Fi 6. They're adopting lots of our solutions. So we see that mix. Now, in addition to that, you do see from countries to countries, I think it's not universal, where a utility provider is becoming a service provider. It's like that value, they have the highways, they have the electricity lines, or they have railways, and they are now providing broadband access to communities. We see that, but that's not massive majority. I think the massive majority is still wireless internet service providers, tier 2, tier 3 service providers, and then and medium and large enterprises who have private networks for their campuses. Those are probably the main players.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I say the rail side, railroad. One of my clients at the moment is a rail organization, and they're looking at local communities.
Absolutely.
We've had there's a couple of questions have come in. They're relatively technical ones, so yeah, we can either tackle them now or later in the session. The first one is just a very simple one. Is for 60 gigahertz. What's the maximum distance you can connect with 60 gig?
So, first of all, Anthony Holmes has a full session coming up in this for 60 gigahertz. It's a full deep dive. Now, my advice is that 60 gigahertz is mostly 1 kilometers to 2 kilometers. That's the kind of range, depending on terrain, weather, atmospheric conditions, all of that plays into it. But it's basically 1 to 2 kilometers. And Anthony will go deeper into technical aspects of the product.
Because obviously there's also sort of mesh models as well, and we're seeing that in various other contexts.
So there is meshing in 60 gigahertz, but in one hop you can do that 1 to 2 kilometers, and then if you do meshing, now you can go multiple kilometers. But meshing also brings its own set of abilities and conditions. And again, please attend Anthony's session, and we'll get deep into this topic.
Yeah, and there's another technical question which I think we'll take later, which is on the interference between 3.6 gigahertz 5G and satellite, which I think is an interesting one, but I think it's maybe one to tackle later on. So
I think Scott Imhoff's session probably touch upon that, and Scott is our very knowledgeable person around some of those issues. So good for his session.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to sort of flag up to the questioner that we've taken on board the question, and we'll come back to that.
Good.
Sounds good. Okay, so I mean, I think we've probably covered quite a lot there, but we've got the last sort of minute left on the Q&A. So I guess as an analyst, I've got to ask this: what comes next? I'm always like thinking, people are always saying, well, what's the world going to look like in 2030 or wherever? Maybe you don't have to go out that far, but if we came back and did this in 5 years' time, let's say, would we be having the same conversation?
I think 5 years from now, 5G will be playing a significant role. And for us, that means fixed 5G, the innovations. And I think we are witnessing pretty revolutionary times in terms of wireless broadband. This multi-gigabit network being enabling the next generation immersive applications is, I think, what we'll see. And the COVID has, in some ways, look at the video. How much video is traversing through the network in last 12 months? It has accelerated video adoption by probably 3-4 years. So my feel is that this next generation of LAN-WAN convergence in the last 10-20 kilometers with multi-gigabit networks is a very key enabler, and 5G will just accelerate that trend even more.
Great. Atul, thank you so much for that. And thank you for the presentation as well. So we're now going to come to the end of this session. And if you'd like to come back at 50 past the hour for our next presenter, it's Anthony Holmes, who's going to be talking about 60 gig and particularly multi-gigabit last mile. What I would say is you will need to click on the watch presentation on the next session on the webpage for that. But before we do that, I'd like you to enjoy the video from Cambium about the partnership with Facebook and Express Wi-Fi in India.
I was 9 years old जब एक एनजीओ धारावी में आई जो बच्चों को स्पोर्ट्स में इन्वॉल्व करती थी। तब से मैंने फुटबॉल खेलना शुरू किया। हाँ, बहुत लोगों ने बोला लड़की है, फुटबॉल बकवास है, मगर मेरे अम्मी अब्बू ने मुझे सपोर्ट किया। मैंने दिन रात प्रैक्टिस की, कहाँ नहीं गई, टोटल 13 कंट्रीज में। 2011 में मुझे पहली बार मौका मिला अमेरिका जाने का। वहां पर एक स्पोर्ट्स ट्रेनिंग एकेडमी में मेरा सिलेक्शन हो गया था। ट्रेनिंग वाज रियली गुड। एक बार मिला मौका, छोड़ने का नहीं। 2012 में लंदन ओलंपिक गई। 2017 में मैंने ड्रीमिंग इन अ स्लम की शुरुआत की।
गुड वन, पीछे जाओ, हाई फाई दो एंड देन स्टार्ट करो वापस।
इट्स नॉट एन एनजीओ, ये तो स्लम के बच्चों को स्पोर्ट्स एंड लाइफ स्किल सिखाने के लिए है। इंटरनेट इज वेरी हेल्पफुल। फेसबुक, इंस्टा, व्हाट्सएप, ट्रेनिंग सेंटर, मैचेस, सब कुछ इजीली मैनेज कर लेती हूँ। शुरू में सिर्फ 10 लड़कियां थी, अभी 90 है और 2 सेंटर हैं। हमारे धारावी में बहुत सारे हॉटस्पॉट है। 1 गीगा फाइबर एंड फेसबुक वालों के ही है। इट्स कॉल्ड वन एक्सप्रेस वाईफाई। आप धारावी में जिधर भी जाओ, इजीली आपको हॉटस्पॉट मिलेगा। मानो वन इंटरनेट ने धारावी को एक साथ दुनिया से जोड़ दिया है। लड़का हो या लड़की, आप लाइफ में कुछ भी कर सकते हो, बस थोड़ा पैशन चाहिए। और आजकल की यंगस्टर तो बहुत टैलेंटेड है। स्लम या बिल्डिंग कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता, बस एक पागलपन चाहिए।